At the edge of the sea, giants do not vanish. They wait to be taken apart.
Every scar on the hull marks decades of cargo, heat, and pressure. Alone.
What looks like waste is still packed with value. Then the yard comes alive. Before the first cut, power is loaded into every machine. Fire enters the process before steel ever moves.
Against the scale of the ship,
Each worker almost disappears.
Soon, broken steel will become liquid again. What was once a ship is already moving toward another life.
Here, entire oil tankers arrive to be dismantled piece by piece.
In this yard, scale is the first thing the camera must respect.
Even the smallest salvage stream has to be separated early.
every section is identified before it moves deeper into the line.
Sections too large to process are broken down by movement first. Once reduced in size, the ship begins to behave like materia. The yard turns chaos into categories. Not everything goes to melt. Some parts leave intact. Each movement feeds the next machine in the chain. The yard stores the ship in layers before it erases it. Structural bones from the tanker now travel as scrap.
Human timing still controls the flow between these giant machines.
What appears to be a graveyard is actually a supply chain.
At full flow, the yard stops looking manual and starts looking like an organism.
Value is extracted by sorting, not by speed alone.
Steel begins to separate from everything else.
The tanker is now divided into material families.
Once the sorting is due, size becomes the next problem to solve. Now the real force enters the frame. Steel does not break quietly.
Some assemblies get refurbished, others become pure raw material.
Compression turns bulky scrap into manageable fragments. Once it enters the machine, shape stops mattering. Then the yard resets the scale with one huge drop. Lighter structures disappear first.
Each burst is a tiny payoff in the destruction cycle.
Force alone is not enough. The metal has to be reoriented too. The process repeats until the material starts to standardize.
At this point, the yard sounds like one continuous collision.
Even heavy structural members eventually give way. Another piece of the tanker loses its last recognizable form.
Volume is squeezed out before melting begins. Heat and shock work together to speed the breakdown. Thick tanker steel resists longer, but not forever.
By now, the ship exists mostly as pieces.
The violence of crushing ends in a strange kind of order. This is where solid steel loses its memory. Everything now moves toward the hottest stage of the process.
Tons of recovered tanker steel drop into the heat in a single controlled release. Electrical energy becomes extreme thermal force. At first, the change is gradual. At first, the change is gradual. Then the chemistry starts to separate what belongs from what does not. Once the melt starts, the material behaves more like lava than metal. Once the melt starts, the material behaves more like lava than metal. Composition is tuned before the new form is locked in. At scale, even molten steel follows a schedule. The temperature must stay exact through every handoff. At scale, even molten steel follows a schedule. After melting, the next challenge is shape. Too much flow ruins the cast. Too little slows the line. The stream must stay continuous, even at the hottest point. The metal is stabilized before it enters its new form. This is the peak of the transformation cycle.
Even the air distorts around this amount of energy.
From here on, the steel begins to take on a future shape. From here on, the steel begins to take on a future shape. The chaos of scrap has become controlled liquid geometry. The chaos of scrap has become controlled liquid geometry. Cooling starts at the surface, not at the center. The outer skin solidifies first, while the center stays alive. Controlled cooling keeps the new section from cracking. The farther it moves, the more its new shape stabilizes. The final profile is tuned by fractions, not by force alone. In premium spaces, structure and decoration often become the same thing.
This is the payoff the process has been building toward.
But every finished surface still carries the memory of what it used to be. In the yard, the end of one giant is always the beginning of something else. But every finished surface still carries the memory of what it used to be. In the yard, the end of one giant is always the beginning of something else.
Luxury depends on control at the smallest scale. Surface quality now matters as much as strength.
Some sections are not meant to hide inside walls. They are meant to be seen.
Precision continues even after the cutting stops. Some recovered steel is destined for luxury, not just structure.
At the end of the chain, quality is felt before it is understood.
Precision is the last form of transformation. The final finish carries no sign of the tanker's past life.
Luxury is often measured in the spaces you cannot see.
Traceability stays attached all the way to the build site. The transformation is now unmistakable. Recycled tanker steel can return as visible architecture. The material has now crossed fully into manufacturing. Even in a mechanized line, the final touch is often manual. What started as irregular hull steel now repeats with architectural precision. Protection now matters as much as precision.
The same material that once crossed oceans now defines luxury space. The industrial past disappears behind precision and finish. Here, the recycled metal no longer looks recycled at all. Even finishing can deliver its own burst of satisfaction.
Digital precision replaces demolition force.
What began as scrap now supports a completely different kind of value.
The last traces of the tanker's old life are removed here.
The yard has done its work. Now the material leaves as product. The yard has done its work. Now the material leaves as product.
Structural quality begins long before final assembly.
What was once an oil tanker is about to rise again in another form. What was once an oil tanker is about to rise again in another form.
Once polished, the new surface has to be protected from the world.
The material has moved from shoreline ruin to urban elevation.
Finishing turns industrial stock into premium material.
Accuracy depends as much on heat control as on cutting force.
One scrap stream has now become multiple finished product streams. The final destination is nothing like the yard where the process began.
Every plate is mapped to maximize yield. Every plate is mapped to maximize yield. At scale, finishing becomes its own choreography.
The steel is now being prepared for assembly, not recycling.
What was once an oil tanker is about to rise again in another form.